Thanks for tuning into the Jesus-Centered Living podcast. We're all about having clear conversations that help us follow Jesus. In a world of endless opinions, conversations with others who know Jesus and know what they're talking about have the power to change our lives. The Jesus-Centered Living podcast aims to help us find out what life could look like if Jesus were at the center of everything. Hey guys, welcome back to the Jesus-Centered Living podcast with Pastor Keith. Glad to have you back with us. We got special guest, Pastor Tim, with us as a part of this episode. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm a little annoyed. I don't always know when these are going to post, but this is like Ohio doing the thing where we do like 4 seasons in 4 days.
Yes.
I think you and I were pretty excited that it was like golf courses.
Like around the corner.
Yeah, like it was coming, snow was gone, looked like we were going to get to play soon. And then now one of my kids had a 2-hour delay today because of snow. So this is what Ohio does. You don't like the weather, stick around. They'll change. And
it's going to be cold, so it's not like it's going to melt in the next few days either, which is even more annoying.
Yeah, but other than that, man, good. Lots of really great stuff here at Grace. Good stuff in life. And so a little tired, but all in all, I'm good.
Good. Awesome. Tim, how you doing, man?
Great. Yeah, I'm doing great. Ready to go. Let's do it.
I'm excited for this episode. One of the things that's just true in people's lives in general is that life is going to throw at you hard conversations in every area of life. And you can either run away from them all or you can learn to actually deal with them and wrestle with them. I was watching a video a couple of weeks ago, and it was on social media. I don't know how it got in my algorithm, but it was there. But it was this video of like some paratrooper training. And they, if you've never seen it before, they kind of line up and they hook themselves on to like inside the plane before they jump out to release their parachute. And they're getting ready to go there, and they're going through. And one guy gets up and he's getting ready to jump. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the drill instructor like gets in his face, like shouting at him, screaming at him, rips him away, throws him on the ground. And it looks like just this really like intense and violent experience, in which like it looks like you're like, I would never want to have a job like that. That sounds horrible. And then what they do later is they unpack what was really happening. In that moment, that guy was about to jump up with this gear not correct. And there was something that was wrapped around his neck that had he actually gone through with it, I mean, that would have been fatal. He'd been toast. And so I think one of the things I loved about that illustratively is what immediately looked like a violent, unpleasant experience was actually literally the most life-giving thing that guy could do in the moment. He literally saved his life. And I think that's just a great picture how so many of us, we look at hard conversations sometimes and we just underestimate the good that can come from them. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited for us to really kind of dive into this conversation and really try to get at this question for people. How could a hard conversation be a good thing?
Yeah. I think what's so interesting about this is I don't really care what you want to do in life if you want to be good at it and move forward. So you're sitting here and you're going, I want to be a good spouse. I want to be a good parent. Mm-hmm. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good boss. I want to be a follower of Jesus that is living a Jesus-centered life myself. I want to help other people live a Jesus-centered life. I could keep going, but you will accomplish none of those without being able and willing to have hard conversations. Every single one of those, you are going to come to moments where you're going to come to a place where there are things that need to be said, ought be said, that the other person is not going to want to hear. And the same thing is true for you on the other side, where you're going to be the recipient of things you don't want to hear. And so I think a lot of times when we talk about hard conversations, we'll spend a little bit of time in this pod talking about how we do them because we need to do them. But I think the other side of this that we need to think about is how do we receive these? Yeah. Because if you want to be a good leader, a good influencer, you're going to have to figure out how to do it. But if you want to be a good leader and a good influencer, you're going to have to figure out how to take it. And so there's some really important reasons that this matters. But I think one of the real issues that we all need to recognize is that when we avoid difficult conversations, what we do is we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. Yes. The reality is by not doing these things, we just prolong certain patterns in life. So in a minute, I want to give kind of a quick list of some reasons why I think these are just inescapable in our lives. But maybe Tim, as we get started and you start to think about why this conversation matters, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's such a critical conversation. And I think you said it well. It doesn't matter what you want to do in life. you've got to have hard conversations if you want to really grow. In fact, I've been reading a leadership book around pain. And one of the things that it's been saying in there, which has been super critical for me to begin to understand, is you'll only grow to the threshold of your pain. So whether, again, it's in a relationship, whether it's in a conversation you need to have at work, whether it's something connected to any part of your life, you've got to step into pain. And difficult conversations just put this on blast.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting is some people right now, you're in your car, you're listening to this and you're going, difficult conversations. I love those. I'm so excited. My favorite part of my day is when I get to have difficult conversations.
Your greatest annoyance, if you're that person, is why nobody else wants to have those conversations
exactly.
with you.
And I would say, okay, for some of us, our personality type is such that the problem isn't that we don't want to have them. It's actually that we're not good at having them.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to have them. And sometimes the people that have the best personality for giving them have the worst personality for receiving them. So I say that to say that, depending on your end of the spectrum, there are some of you that you're terrified. You never want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
Your Enneagram profiles that you're a peacemaker and you never want to upset anyone. You never want to frustrate anyone. You always want to keep the balance in all things. And you need to be challenged to recognize you're actually failing other people by not doing this. And then others of us that may be along the personality profile that is like, I love doing this. And I'm including myself in that bucket.
Do we know anybody?
I don't know anybody who fits into that category.
We need to make sure we're doing it well and that we are also good at receiving it and that we also understand our own motives and our own hearts, why we go into these. But a couple things that I think are so important, and I'm going to work from the Christian perspective and then just kind of like, down, and you guys can chime in. Let me tick through 4 of these though. I think the reason that these hard conversations are just critical, number one is, as a Christian, Jesus actually commands that you have to do it. And so Jesus commands hard conversations sometimes. Probably the clearest picture of this is the principle that when someone sins against you in Matthew 18, Jesus says that you go talk to that person. And then if it doesn't work with just you, you bring another person or two with you. And then eventually the whole church community has a hard conversation with that person. But the principle is you have to be willing to go talk to the believer and the other person. And as a follower of Christ, people will sin against you and you will sin against other people. And again, you'll be on the receiving end of that conversation. You'll be on the giving end of that conversation. And so the first reason we have to figure this out is like Jesus straight up commands it. The second thing is, again, connected to what it means to live a Jesus-centered life is relationships require it.
Yeah.
You can't have deep, real, rich, meaningful relationships and not know how to talk through hard things. I mean, be married for like longer than 24 hours and you know that this is going to be true. Try having kids, so on and so forth. You have to be able to do this. In fact, to the extent to which two people can actually bring up and like resolve hard issues, that's really the mark of the maturity of their relationship. If you can't talk about things and really work through what's hard. And what a lot of us do is we suppress, we push it down, or we blow up. In fact, in our culture, I think there's kind of 2 pendulums that manifest themselves both in relationship or in general, which is like avoidance or aggression.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to not be an avoider, or you're not going to be aggressive, I've said in marriage messages before that there's normally in every marriage, there's a turtle and a skunk. Mm-hmm. The turtle's the one that wants to hide and avoid. The skunk is the one that wants to just kind of launch everything out and be aggressive. So relationships require it. God commands it. Relationships require it.
Can we pause real quick before you go, Keith?
Go.
I think what you just said is super critical, and you said a little bit earlier too, but it is part of that knowing your bias. Some of us want to avoid and some of us want to be hyper aggressive. And as we get into this, I would just say to anybody who's listening, you should know real quick and identify at the front end of this conversation which of those 2 you are, because it'll help frame even the way we talk about this for the rest of the time.
Yeah. And with that, neither bias is correct. Mm-hmm. Because you want to do this or you want to avoid it, you are not more spiritual or better or what. Like the truth is, it's an inevitable reality to what it means to be human, to be able to do this, to achieve your full potential, to help other people achieve their full potential. And so knowing your bias is part of it, but also not somehow thinking your bias is better is also part of it. Being willing to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of your bias, all that. So Jesus commands it. Relationships require it. Number 3, leadership demands it. If you're gonna, again, try to influence and move people, I don't care if it's at work, I don't care if it's with your kids, wherever it is, a coach, however it plays out, leadership just demands it. In fact, leadership is often about managing disappointment at a rate that people can handle. And part of that is knowing even how to do hard conversations, how to process it, how to receive them, all of those things. And so if you're just going to lead, you're going to have to be good at this. You're going to have to figure it out. Part of leadership is pulling people to places they wouldn't go on their own, which means you're going to have to pull people. You're going to have to push people. And then the last thing, again, both as the giver and as the receiver, is growth depends upon it. If you're going to really become everything you can be and other people are going to become everything they can be, we have to know how to give and receive this. I mean, this is part of, even in the Christian world, the Bible talks about when in Galatians 6, when people sin, that you go to them and you restore them gently.
Yes.
Which means you know how to talk with them in a way that is full of both truth and grace. It's truth seasoned with love and salt and all the things. But it also means you're ready to receive it in a way that's going to help you. And so what we recognize is that the method and the message both matter in this process, right? As does the messenger. Like, all of those things are a part of this. And so just quickly coming back to those, if you're going to recognize why this matter, because Jesus commands it, because relationships require it, leadership demands it, and then growth depends upon it.
I think one of the things that could be helpful for this for some people, there have been a number of really strategic moments in my life where someone had the courage to graciously have a hard conversation with me that has set me up for so much success in life. Like, the husband I am, the man I am, the pastor I am, the friend I am is really built on the foundation of a number of people willing to have hard conversations with me that were so incredibly life-giving. And the times where I've been able to give that to other people and it's been life-giving for them, like, I just hope like our listeners can start to get a vision for how much of a gift this can be when it's done well. And it's not something that we have to be absolutely terrified about in our life or just cavalierly charge into it because that's our personal preference.
I was 21 years old. I was leading a young adult ministry at a church, and our worship service that actually I had preached at had just ended. We were hanging around. People were just spending time together talking. And there was this one guy who was kind of off by himself. And I went over and I started talking to him, and he wanted to make sure he was like, "Do you know my name?" I said, "I know your name." And then he went on, and for the next 5 minutes, he gave a talk to me about how he was actually really shocked I was talking to him, because he said, what I've observed about you, Keith, is that your propensity is to only go talk to people who are like you. And he said some really hard things about how he had been involved in this ministry and felt like people like me had not pursued him. And what he had observed was I just ran to the people that sort of dressed like, talked like, were in the hobbies I was in.
Yeah.
That was 26 years ago, and it marked me.
Yeah.
And I remember driving home, and I was in tears. It was awful. And I'm so thankful for that brother. I'm so thankful for that conversation. And the truth was, we talk a lot of days now about power dynamics and whatnot. The truth was, the power dynamics were in that particular space. I had all the power, and yet he stood up and graciously, directly, boldly said some things to me that marked my life, that changed me and forced me to really be honest. And it was so hard not to want to argue with him the whole time he was doing it. It was so hard not to want to give exceptions and excuses and reasons. And yet, to this day, I'll find myself in a space and I'll ask myself, am I doing what that brother said I did 26 years ago? Am I still doing it? And so I'm really thankful. And I have no idea how many times that young man rehearsed, feared, was nervous, whatever it was. But he said it, and it was really important.
Not only has that been good for you, but that person probably doesn't even understand the good that it's then breathed into our church and
for
our
sure.
staff. And the courage for him to do that outstripped his wildest dreams on the good it could do, right? Which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this topic, because it really can be so good for people.
Can I jump in and share another side of that story? I was in my mid-20s and a student pastor at a church, and I'm a goal-oriented, strategic process person. Like I can be far more objective, head than heart, like all of that. And I mean, our student ministry was growing. We were reaching a bunch of students. And to be honest, our growth was outpacing the church. And the lead pastor at the time managed me, and we would have these conversations. And I'm like, stop getting on my back. Like, we're just trying to run, like run with us and all of this. And I remember we were sitting in his blue truck, and he looked at me and he said, Tim, can I tell you something straight? And I said, absolutely. And he said, how good are you really doing at loving the person in front of you? And I remember looking at him and I said, but we're growing, and he said, how are you doing at truly loving the person in front of you? And similar to you, Keith, it marked my life and my ministry. And that was a guy that had all the power dynamic. And he could have powered up on me, and he could have, but he didn't. He actually brought it down, spoke to my heart in a way that was like, you need to shift this and be more like Jesus.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things that's probably important to do for a few moments right now is, I think if most people are honest, even after listening to us for a few minutes, I think people go, they're probably right. Hard conversations matter.
But
Even if I don't like
it,
but I still don't want to do it. And I think one of the questions is why. What are some of the things that people experience or feel or sense that keep people from wanting to do this? And so I'll go first, and then you guys can jump in. But I think one of the things is oftentimes what's happened in our culture is what we call empathy is really just cowardice. We've created this definition of sympathy, compassion, and empathy that is like, you never hurt anybody's feelings, you never make them uncomfortable, you never push them. And so I think there's some people that are saying, well, Keith, the reason I don't want to have hard conversations is actually because I'm an empathetic person.
Yeah.
And I just want to push on people a little bit to go, are you really being empathetic, or are you being a coward? Because the truth is, again, I said it a little bit ago, when you sometimes don't make things uncomfortable, what you really do is empower them to be dysfunctional for a long time. And it's actually the least empathetic thing you can do. You're setting them up to be in prison and in jail for a long time. And so I think one of the things that we have to do is recognize that our empathy is mislabeled sometimes, and is really we're being a coward.
Yeah, it's not that I don't want them to feel bad. It really is, I just don't want to feel bad.
Sure.
It was I am a recovering people pleaser, and I think that is part of the narrative that is we like to pretend that I'm just trying to spare them from hard feelings. And I just know in myself so many times it was just, I just don't want to feel bad. I don't want to feel guilty. If they feel bad, then it's going to look bad on me, and I don't want to be that person. And that's the real motivation behind so much of the avoidance. Yeah.
Keller said one time, Pastor Tim Keller, he said this notion. He said, if you need approval or a great reputation, then you'll be a coward and will not tell people the truth about how you feel or the truth about them. And that's hard to hear, but I think it's rooted sometimes in another interesting thing that's underneath this, which is, the truth is, we fear people sometimes more than we fear God, because sometimes we know what God wants us to say.
Yeah.
We to be honest, man, I see this with parents of young adults and teenagers. They won't say sometimes what they need to say to their kids because they fear their kids more than they fear God. Actually, they know God wants them to tell their kid that their kid is off on that, or that needs a change, or that needs to be different. But that people pleasing, it feels like humility, but it's actually disguised pride. Yeah. Because you fear what people think of you more than you fear what God thinks of you. And that's pride.
Yeah, it's not love for them, it's love for comfort.
Totally. Which is love for self.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately proud.
Yep.
And so I think that, a couple things is, let's stop labeling empathy when it's really cowardice. Let's be honest that sometimes we fear people more than we actually fear God. Yep. What do you guys think? What are some of the motivations for people for why they don't want to step into these?
I think it's a subset of what you're saying, but I just want to be liked. I just want people to like me. And I think it's a very common thing. In fact, if you don't want anyone to like you, you're probably a sociopath, right? To a certain extent, like I don't even want my kids or my wife to like me. Like, so it's a natural good thing,
Sure.
But it's like we take that thing and it's like that becomes our guiding North Star for how we make decisions and why we avoid conversations. And I just recognize that, like, for me, sometimes it was an idol of wanting to be liked. And that put me into a corner that made me a coward.
Yeah, and you guys have heard me say this a lot, especially when you sit in a leadership position. One of the things you have to recognize as a leader is that you have to cauterize the nerve to be liked.
Yep.
Because you're going to make decisions that people don't like, and you're going to bother people, and that's all right. What else?
That applies to parenting too. Like
For sure.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Tim.
Yeah, maybe the other piece, and I am a little at this table. You two definitely are more in the let's have some hard conversations than I am, which is great, and that's the benefit probably of the whole table too. For me, there's been plenty of moments in my life, and some of the times when I needed to have real difficult conversations where I prayed for God to break my heart over where that person was at, where if they keep going down the track they're going, where they'll end up,
that's good.
Or the potential that will be lost in their life if they don't change this around. And as God broke my heart on it, I actually cared enough to have the conversation. And it is the opposite of empathy.
Yeah.
Like, I think true empathy demands at some point that you have the conversation.
Well, you're actually helping them get out of the ditch by having the conversation, which, as opposed to they're in the ditch and you're doing nothing about it. And so, yeah, it's a, but some of that I think is actually getting to maybe another subset of this idea of empathy is our culture's definition sometimes of love. That, again, love doesn't hurt, love doesn't push back, love doesn't make things, love never makes any judgments, love never says you're wrong, And the reality is, to your point, Tim, that like when you actually love someone and your love has grown for them and the Lord has broken your heart and you see the wall they're about to get into, you feel compelled to have to speak. You feel compelled to have to do something. You see the potential that they're missing out on. You see the things that they're going to destroy. And so, non-judgmentalism comes to this idea. It's like, I won't tell you you're wrong. But biblical compassion actually comes to a point that says, I love you too much not to that I have to talk. Like, I love you too much to lie to you and just be okay with that. And so we've talked about this in other podcasts, this like line between, truth and grace, and when it becomes like a frat house when there's no grace, and when it just becomes not helpful when there's no truth and all the kind of stuff. And yet this is a really good example where the cultural definition of love, I actually think, is hurting people.
Yes. It's more like niceness. They define love as niceness. And those are not the same thing. Like, when you love someone, you will be nice to them, right? Like that's inescapable, but that's not the sum of what it means to be loving. And I think for myself and for other people, like, we're actually more motivated to be nice than we actually are to be loving. Because if we're loving, we do what you guys have been talking about. Like, let my heart be broken over where they've been going. Like, see the potential that they have and have that hard conversation.
Yeah, and I think where this gets interesting in the like work world is sometimes the reason you have to have the conversation with them is actually because your job as the leader is to love the organization or the entity at a high level, that you've got to pull them forward in a way that's going to feel unloving because it's the right thing to do for the corporate good. It's the right thing to do for the whole organization. Sometimes in the chair that I sit in, I know the decisions I'm going to make sometimes are going to be hard for you to, or for other people in the church. But the truth is, God's called me and our elders to make decisions that think about our whole community, our whole church. In fact, our staff feels this. Our staff will feel sometimes where we're calling them to do something, and I'll say to them, my primary role as the leader of this church is not your comfort staff. It's to shepherd the people well. And sometimes shepherding the people well is going to feel at the expense of your comfort, which means the hard conversation I'm having might feel unloving to you, but it's because I've got to love the greater entity that is at stake. So the other thing I was going to say, unless you want to jump in.
I think there's a real applicable piece to this to a bunch of people watching and listening to this that also has to do with people who volunteer in a church. A lot of people probably volunteer in a church context that are listening to this, and there's hard conversations sometimes that church staff members have with you as a volunteer that at times you're like, well, I would do it this way, or I would want to do it that way. And again, it goes back to the same thing. Sometimes the hard conversation is to the betterment of the entire church or the ministry you serve in. And it takes you being humble enough to set down your desires and to listen to that feedback and conversation so that the whole thing can move forward and we can be unified in direction.
Yeah, and that again, this is where it comes back to not just knowing how to give that, but how to receive that.
Receive it.
Yep.
If I'm on the other side, I'm that volunteer and I'm being challenged about something, do I have the humility and ability to discern what's good for everyone? I think another part of this is because we're such creatures of the immediate and what we feel, I think what's really easy to do sometimes is overestimate the risk of speaking up, but underestimate the risk of our silence.
Yes.
So, we look and we're like, if I say this, the relationship may end. They may get frustrated. They may get mad. They may not invite me to the thing. But we don't look and do the long-term game and go, but what happens if I don't say anything? Yeah. Where is this really headed? And I think sometimes if we looked and we really played the tape forward and we saw where this is going, I think it's almost easier sometimes like our kids to do this because we feel the responsibility to play the long game. But in any area of life to look and go, what's the real risk of my silence? What's the real risk if I don't do something? There was that movie Zero Dark 30, which was about when they were tracking Osama bin Laden and they were managing the risk to see were they going to invade the compound where they thought he was. And the risk analytics people were saying like, we're not sure we have enough confidence and enough statistical probability to say we should make this move and send the helicopters and do the whole thing. And in the movie, the guy asked the question, the other side, he's like, I know you've considered the risk of if we do, have you considered the risk if we don't, if we don't actually act upon this? And he's there and he gets away. And I think sometimes asking that question of going, okay, I'm terrified. You're on your way to work. You're on your way to the living room. You're on your way to the locker room. And it's like, I'm terrified to have this conversation and then go, what happened if I don't?
Yeah.
Where does this really go if I don't have this conversation? And that I think gets just into a little bit of we're short-sighted sometimes. So we're going to get into the mechanics a little bit of how to do these, but anything else about maybe why you guys perceive people don't want to do this?
I think one thing that comes up, and I think this is very subconscious, like it doesn't go into, it's not a cognitive part of their process, is there is this reality that like if you dread this, you're going to have to deal with a fight or flight. Like your own biology is going to work against you. And so you have to have the awareness to be like, just because I'm feeling like I want to run doesn't mean I should run. It's just a natural biological reality of something that I'm processing. And I think there's a lot of people that they just allow them, they don't get past that spot. They don't recognize that this is not a bad thing. This is not everything. This is a natural thing that happens when you are anticipating these things. It's not a cue from God or from the universe or whatever that you should avoid this. It's actually something that you should lean into rather than kind of surrendering to.
Yeah, there's a future pod coming up about some of the dangers of like the modern day therapy movement. But one of the dangers is we've gotten really poor culturally at doing hard things and overcoming what we've been told is like anxiety or stuff that's scary. And so, I mean, again, like hard conversations we're talking about, they're hard. You're not going to tell someone they want to, bank air in your favor, you get a bunch of money. They're hard for a reason. Yeah. And so to your point, like, you have to practice getting good at doing hard things. And just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In fact, our culture is oftentimes training us that the moment hard shows up in our soul, it must mean I shouldn't do it. I need to run from it. And that's actually terrible. That's a recipe for a lot of bad things. And so your initial biology and biochemistry saying this is going to be difficult actually can be a signal to say this is probably worth it. And you need to lock in and you need to pay attention. So, Tim, I'm going to get ready to go into like how we do this, but did you have anything else you wanted to add before we finish this up?
Maybe the only other thing is I think as you're anticipating or specifically putting off a hard conversation, to look in the mirror and be honest about what it's doing to you.
That's good.
I think there's a huge part of it that we don't want to recognize the bitterness it causes in our hearts, the way we put up walls against other people. when we don't have those conversations. And I would just look at anybody and say, at the point that you know you need to have a hard conversation or something like that's in your life, and all you find yourself doing is playing it over and over in your head, what you would say if you had the opportunity, what you should say. Like,
I've never done that in my entire life, ever.
At that point, you should have the conversation.
Yeah.
Because there is a part of, and this is even, I mean, there's real physical elements to this that happen in our lives and our bodies when we're holding on to that and not having the conversations that we need to have.
That probably makes the fight or flight even that much more
higher.
intense, right?
Yep.
And so by not doing it, you're just making the mountain that much bigger. It's literally taking a psychological molehill and turning it to a
I
mountain.
think it's a great insight, Tim, because the scriptures talk about this connection between what's going on in our soul and what goes on in our physical body. And I know just from working with you guys in my own soul that there's been times where hard conversations are coming and you're losing sleep. And you're losing sleep because maybe you haven't had it when you should. And then that's making you a less effective dad or a less effective spouse or not as good at loving the people in front of you. And then that makes you have a different set of problems, which creates a different set of anger. And now you're tense and then you didn't get your workout in. And that now I ate ice cream.
You take it out on your kids. Now you have to have another hard conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So the truth is there is this connective tissue between like what's going on in your soul and the fact that you really need to have this. So what I want to do for a few minutes is I want to work through how do you actually do this mechanically, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to this is a talk that you guys have heard me give to the staff, and I'm going to work through, this is like the way you actually set up mechanically framing a hard conversation. Now, the truth is, this is going to feel very, in some ways, sterile, but there's principles here that if you're having a hard conversation with your 16-year-old daughter, there's stuff that's
Great.
here. You're talking with a friend, there's things that are here. So I'm going to go through those. But one of the things that I want to say before I start this is I want to encourage all of us that before we ever go have any hard conversation, that we process what I call the thick ice principle, which is whoever I'm about to go have this conversation with, how thick is the ice that I have with them? And here's what I've learned in life and in ministry. There's been times where I have assumed thick ice and I went and had the hard conversation and I did it in a way, in a tone, in a place that I miscalculated how much thick ice I had and it did not go well. There's other times where the truth was I fretted about the conversation more than I needed to because I had really thick ice with the person. Mm-hmm. In every environment, this is, by the way, a really important communication principle. Whenever you get up to talk anywhere, you have some level of ice with whoever you're talking to. In fact, even everyone listening to this pod right now, we have different levels of thick ice or not thin ice with them. And so one of the things I think is really important is before you go have this conversation, like if they're in your org chart, what is the position on the org chart, your position, their position? What does that create for the ice? How does that help or hinder that? What history do you have with them? Yeah. Is this the first one? Is this the last, the another one of 10? I mean, where's it all at? So, okay. First thing is pick the right time and right place. So think about your best time of the day to have hard conversations. Try to anticipate their best time of the day to have hard conversations. Is this a coffee shop conversation? Is this a private in the office conversation? Is this a conversation we can have in the car when we're driving to go play a round of golf or not? Like right time, right place, and really wrestle with that. And I should say that as a follower of Jesus, all of this should be bathed in prayer. Like you really should wrestle and seek the Lord and go, God, give me the right time, the right place. This is also like, how well do you know the person? What can you anticipate? Looking at your day going like, hey, I have to have a really hard conversation. I don't know that I should do this after I've had 5 other hard conversations or I've led 4 staff meetings or whatever it is. So right time, right place. Okay, that's really doing the work of that. Number 2, frame the moment. So when the person comes in, you look at them in some regard and you look at them and you say, hey, thanks for coming here today. I just want to warn you, this is going to be a hard conversation. This is going to be a challenging conversation. I don't know how much of that you anticipated. I don't know what you feel. I don't know where your heart is, but I just want to, I've been feeling this. And sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't, but you just tell them, you recognize the gravity of the situation and you frame it.
I found more times than not, they're already anticipating it.
Yeah. And You recognizing that you know that for them then does something, because you're saying, I recognize you probably have some level of apprehension and stuff going on in your heart, and so do I, right? So pick the right time, right place. Number 2, frame the moment. Number 3, lay it out. So this is where you start to get in to the actual stuff. So you give the clear position of what's actually going on. Now, I want to put 2 things here. Clear position, gracious disposition.
That's good.
Clear position, gracious disposition. So I'm telling you what's really going on, but I'm doing my best. Now, depending on the who, depending on how long it's been brewing, depending on this, that can be hard, right? You know, as a dad, sometimes having the gracious disposition is harder, depending on even who you are and the power dynamics. What you thought was a gracious disposition can be perceived by them as not, like depending on what's going on. But you're clearly telling them things like, you're not getting it done. This has to change. Here are the facts. You are going to lose your job today. You are going on a plan today. You have a new curfew. Whatever those are, like you're really, really clear, and you're stating to them, I'm laying out the reality. Okay. So I've picked the right time and the place. I've framed the moment. I've laid it out. Number 4, I'm stating the path forward. So in light of the details that I've just given you about the reality of the situation, now I've told you what results have to happen, what deliverables have to go on, what are the consequences, what are the time frame. So I've looked and I've said, Tim, in light of this conversation, you're going to have 4 weeks to change in this reality. If this reality doesn't change, this is the consequences that are going on. And here's what I'll tell you. Probably the most important word I can give you for this part of the hard conversation is clarity. That you are just overwhelmingly clear. And I would also say this is a great part for you to stop and ask them if they have questions. Did you understand the issues? Do you understand the path forward? Do you understand everything that's going to go on? So I've really—
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go
quick?
ahead.
I think even more so than ask if they have clarity, ask them to repeat back to you
100%.
what it is that they've heard.
100%.
So
make sure everybody's on the same page, okay? The number 5, and this is huge, and this is one at times, if I'm not really focused on it, I forget. And early in my professional career, I didn't understand the value of it. This is offer your support. What can you do to help them in this process? And sometimes you know that and you say, here's what I'm going to do to help you. Here's how I'm going to walk alongside you as you try to deal with number 4. Sometimes you ask them, what's the most helpful thing I can do to help you accomplish going after number 4? But I'm in this with you. I care about you. I want to understand that. Here's how I want to get after this. So how can I help you? And you really say that. So you offer your support. Number 6, you restate the details. So again, after they've reset it, even maybe to you, you go back and you say, let's just revisit where we've been, revisit the timeline.
Great.
This is what you've told me you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. Are we all on the same page? Everything good. And then the last one, number 7, is thank the other side. I know this conversation was hard for you. I'm so thankful for your demeanor during this. I'm thankful for the way you listened. I'm thankful for your receptivity. I'm thankful, however that goes. Sometimes we know this. Sometimes in these conversations, you've cried, they've cried. Sometimes they've shut down. Sometimes you're getting ready to tell them that they've lost their job or something's really hard has happened. And looking at them in the best way you can to love them and say, I'm thankful and I really, really appreciate it. So let me just go through those and then I want you guys to comment.
And we'll put it in the show notes as well too, so that people can follow.
Pick the right time, right place, frame the moment, lay it out, state the path forward, offer your support, restate the details, and then thank the other side. And let me say that you can follow that formula and it still goes bad.
Yeah.
Sure.
It doesn't go.
It's not a magic formula?
No, it's not a magic formula. So as you guys hear that, thoughts, responses to that.
What was the one where you're talking about the disposition?
Yeah, I'm talking about when you were laying it out and I said, clear position, gracious disposition.
When you were saying that, I think one of the things that a lot of people get wrong with this, the relationships that matter most with the disposition are like the close, intimate relationships. And I feel like those are the ones that we're most tempted to cheat on the disposition. But it's like, no, you owe your spouse, you owe your kids even more of that gracious disposition than someone at work or someone at church, like those intimate relationships. But I know it's just so much easier to cheat there, which throws this whole thing off.
Yeah. And I think sometimes even as parents, or your spouse, you probably do have really thick ice, But what you do is you use that thick ice as permission to be a jerk or permission to be lazy or permission to be unloving. And so you're like, well, they're my kid. They're not going anywhere. I pay their stuff anyways. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
So you're like, and I'm right. And you probably are right. But that's not permission to not have a gracious disposition, to which I would say one of the things that I hope people would intuit, but it's important to say, if you do this and you miss part of that, and maybe you miss the gracious disposition, go back and apologize.
Yeah.
Hey, I had the real, I've had to do this with my kids. I've had to do this with Kelly, where I've had to do it with employees, where I've had the conversation, and then I've had to go back and say, I recognize the way or the where or the how that went wasn't as good as it wasn't right. And I need to own that part of it. So what else as you guys hear those steps?
So I love it, Keith. I think it lays out a great formula. The one thing I would say is we're saying this in this podcast, even of having a hard conversation. The level to which you want this to be a conversation on the spectrum of this is going to determine the level to which you follow that formula even.
Yep.
I think the way you laid it out just very clearly like that works really good in just a clear like job situation.
Yep.
Or someone who's offended you that you need to have that talk, like that kind of part. When I'm sitting down with my spouse and want to have a conversation about something,
Honey, we're on
I
step
don't know
3.
that pulling the notes out and actually walking through it, works the same. So
I do think though, if I can interrupt, like if you're in a marriage context where you realize both of you are terrible at this and you're trying to get better, print out the paper and go through it.
And
Seriously.
So the other thing I would add, I would drop a couple things in depending on how much of a conversation you want it to have versus a information sharing part of it, is you need to take some time in there to understand their side of the story. Right? There are some parts of going, I've been talking for a little while, or I've shared the issue. How do you feel about that? And then also, I think taking the personal responsibility as a part of the conversation. There's many times that the honest truth is we have taken way too long to share this. And it has built up bitterness and resentment. And so to say, I'm sharing this with you and I have to take responsibility for the fact that I should have said this 3 months ago. Or this has bothered me for a while and that's on me for not sharing it.
Or child, I actually set the framework in our house that allowed you to go do this behavior. And I need to own the fact that I'm the one who put you in this place and created these things. Hey, by the way, son or daughter, I've dropped the ball for a number of years and I have to own that in that, to your point. And it's really well said. I mean, because the truth is, whether this is with a conversation or this is just with a business person, this is all more art than it is science.
It absolutely is.
And the framework gives you a way to start to put some of the art on, and it gives you a way to think about it in your head. But learning to, because in this, there's also like, am I reading their body cues? Some people get to the point where you're not even past step 2 and they're done. Like you can't even talk anymore because they can't hear you anymore. I mean, we've had places where employees where something's gone on and we've had to have a conversation and we've gotten to step 3. And their entire mental capacity is just done. And it's like, this is not the time to do anything else because they can't go. So are you reading their cues? Are you reading that it looks like they want to say something? But so what else? Were you going to add anything else into that? You're right. Conversation dynamic is different than an employer-employee dynamic or even a coach-player dynamic. But again, that framework helps you get to some of this.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, maybe I should just say this too, no matter what the scope of the conversation, I think one of the most important pieces that you've shared that's important in any single hard conversation is to have the clarity of what is going to be done from here and to make sure and say that. And I think it's one of the biggest pieces that falls apart in the conversation. So with your kid, it's not you just have it and then it's left out there and nobody knows what to do next. Or even with your spouse. Like, so what is it that we're going to commit to do on the other side of this? And then obviously in a work situation, making sure that that's incredibly clear. Or a friendship situation. Here's what we're going to agree to do on the other side of this.
Yeah, you just went to one, friendship is hard, but man, a place where I see that people would get a lot out of like figuring out how to do this formula is with in-laws. And like family expectations around holidays and vacations and all the things. What's true is when you start putting families together and figuring this out, and then you get in the car and people drive home and they're like, what are we doing? And it's like, hold on. You don't get to hold them guilty for a conversation that you're not willing to have.
Yeah.
good.
So
Say that one more time, because that was really good.
You don't get to hold them guilty for a conversation you're not willing to have.
So
I
good.
often will look at people and say, either have the conversation or get over it. But you don't get to live in that I won't have the conversation and just be mad about it. So you're going to deal with it, or you got to move past
That is 90% of people's default reaction to those situations.
Sure.
Right. Is I'm just going to be mad about it. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to rehearse that conversation over and over again. But I would never bring that up with them. Like that would be.
Well, and you're going to find, then what you're going to do is you're going to find podcasts and people that reinforce your opinions of why those people are idiots, whoever those people are, which will just make your argument more strong, which will just make you more frustrated about everything that goes on every holiday, family vacation, or whatever it is. And again, this is where some people are going, yeah, but if I have the conversation, then this is what would happen. Right. But what's happening by not having the conversation?
Yep.
Your every holiday, every vacation, every family gathering is miserable, is ruined. There's no intimacy. There's no connection. There's resentment. You hide in the corner. You like, and it's not, and as a Christian, you're missing out on what is supposed to be a beautiful, fulfilling connection with families. And instead, you're just enduring something.
Yeah.
And not learning to enjoy it.
I think one of the things that we should add before we move forward that can be really helpful. One of the things you got to like prepare yourself for is if you've done the work to think through the formula, to think through some of these principles, you're going to go into the conversation much more equipped probably than the person you're having the conversation. And there has to be a level of patience and graciousness that comes from that when you're more prepared, you're ready to have this conversation, and you might have to let them know and then turn this into conversations, because it's just not fair to go in like, I've been thinking about this and processing this, and I have a 20-page paper with a thesis on how to deal with this.
And so we're
it's
done.
like, yes, and they're like, I don't even know this is an issue, you know? Like, but so often we work ourselves up to the point, and then we go in and we're not even giving them the benefit of that to catch up, let alone have a fair conversation.
That's so true in mass leadership with groups of people, where you as the leader have been thinking about something for so long, you drop it on them, and then you're like, are we all on board? And it's like, hey,
it's
bro,
the first time I've heard this.
Exactly. You've been thinking about it for 7 months, and you gave them 17 minutes, and then you're frustrated.
It was a good 17 minutes.
they're not ready to sign up. Tim, you've had this conversation before that when we do these, there's actually more than one conversation going on. Why don't you give us some thoughts on that? Because I think it's a really helpful thing to process, that even when we do this formula well, there's some things going on in the space.
Yeah, and I think this is important, again, for people on both sides of the conversation, right? So whether you're the one giving it or the one receiving it, these are both important. In every difficult conversation, there's really 3 conversations happening at the same time. The first is the facts conversation. And some of that is why clarity needs to be established. It's starting to go like, who's right, who's wrong, what are the real facts in the situation? And the caution in that is to really watch for blame. When you find yourself wanting to blame the other person or take blame yourself, but there's this facts conversation that's got to happen. Then the second one, another layer of it, is the feelings conversation, because it's never just about the facts, right? We talk about in marriage, all of a sudden you start to have a difficult conversation, then it spins into something you're not even talking about the thing anymore. And it's because there's a whole feelings dynamic that's going on. And to act like emotions won't be present is not helpful. Again, whether you're receiving it or you're the one giving it, there's the feelings conversation. And then the third one is the identity conversation. Because man, when you start to have a hard conversation, when you're receiving it, if you're not careful, you can either get super defensive because you feel like they're attacking something, or you start to get full of shame or guilt because of lies that you believe about yourself, because you feel like it's attacking your identity. Or when you're the one saying it, you can, have this identity part of, you probably don't even want to listen to me, or, you probably think I'm an idiot by even saying this, or whatever that is, and being really careful that you're rooted in your identity. And obviously for us, that's a deep root in your identity in Christ and who he has made you to be, that you are a child of God regardless of the nature of the conversation, but to really be paying attention to that identity piece that can be pinging off in you, that's creating the emotion also within the conversation.
I would bet that the people that are most excited about having hard conversations often want to just have the conversation stay on level one. Like they're excited because they're ready to talk about the facts. And then as soon
Or
as it goes to
argue the
level two,
facts.
argue the facts. But as soon as it goes to level 2 and level 3, they actually probably are just as resistant as everybody else. Being like, I don't want to go there. At least that's what I've noticed with a lot of people I know that have a more disposition to have some of these conversations.
But Keith, this is how I feel right now.
Great. What's true? Yeah, and I think some of this ventures back to, you were talking about praying for the person and having a heart for them. I think some of it is also praying for yourself to go, what's the motives you have for even getting into this conversation? Is your motive really love? Is your motive your day in court? Is your motive, I want to be right? Is your motive really help? Like what's going on? And then as a follower of Jesus going, okay, is that motive, I can clearly assess it. Is it Christian? Is it line up with what Jesus would really want me to do? Does it line up with his word? All those kind of things, because there's a lot of reasons we can want to have a hard conversation if we do want to have it.
Yeah.
And some of those are actually not right. And the conversation shouldn't be had. But really assessing that and working through that, sometimes you can want to have the right conversation for the wrong motive. And so really looking back and what's going on. You said this. I think probably the way to think about this is through the lens of when people have hard conversations with you, but to begin to ask yourself, what are some of your initial responses? And you said one of them can be defensive, one of them can be blame. But I think a couple other ones, one is sometimes to minimize. This is the real easy response where you just go, it's not a big deal. I heard what you said, but it's not a big deal. Well, they wouldn't be talking to you about it if they didn't think it was a big deal. And whether or not they're right, we can work out, but they think it's a big deal. That's why they're having the hard conversation with you. And so we got to be careful about the minimizing size. On the other side, when we're presenting, we have to ask, are we overestimating something that actually isn't that big a deal? But like we can minimize. I think we can also deny, oh, that never happened. That's not true. That's not real. And that's where it's interesting sometimes that you guys have seen this in me. Like one of my strengths is I bring the facts. One of my weaknesses is I bring the facts. And so like when I go into lawyer mode, I know what's real or not, which can be really, really hard because then it feels like I don't care about your feelings. But when people come at you, even when you're good at recalling facts, you got to be careful that you're not fully denying something that actually was real, even though you might be talking about it. This is a huge one. Some of us project. Instead of hearing what they say, we're like, you do the same thing. Who are you to tell me that? Like, this is awesome in marriage. Like they start coming at you with one and you're like, oh, you want to bring that up? I'll tell you when you do that.
Let me just get out this list in my back pocket.
Right. Hold on. My phone has notes on it, sweetheart. And so, I think we can all recognize, or we should recognize, what are some of our natural dispositions towards when people have these hard conversations with us.
I think when you were talking about the projection, what thought jumped in my brain about that, going to your third level of the conversation, I think that's where projection, especially with a lot of men, I'm sure it applies to women as well too. But like when someone's having a hard conversation, a spouse is bringing something up, I project like this deep criticism about my inadequacy as a husband or as a father, or it goes straight to that identity piece. And like I found, at least for me, a lot of the projection cuts straight from like layer 1 all the way to layer 3. And it's almost like I skip that second in between. And it just goes, my wife sometimes like, I was just talking about how we can improve our communication. Now you're trying to run away thinking you're a terrible husband. Like how did we get there that fast? And it's so easy. It happens so quick that you got to really pay attention to these things.
Yeah, I heard someone say this years ago, so good, in the receiving of the conversations. It's connected to our identities and that kind of stuff. Feedback is neutral. Feedback is neutral. I could give both of you the same amount or say the same exact thing.
Good, yeah.
You will receive it one way, you will receive it the other way, and it says far more as the receiver often about me than it does about what's even being said. So again, this is the put a mirror up to yourself when you're feeling like, oh, I'm ready to, it's like, oh, hold on. What is it about me that I have to get right before God or get right in my own heart? Because the reality is the feedback I'm receiving is...
And Proverbs actually speaks to this. So, we're talking about, again, a lot of people when they hear a pod like this, they're like, okay, how do I do it? How do I do it? But we said, how do I receive it? And Proverbs has words for this. The wise person hears the feedback and applies it, grows from it, changes from it, learns from it, repents, whatever they need to do. The fool doesn't really change. And they just kind of go, thanks, I'm going to keep kind of doing what I'm doing, and moves on and doesn't grow. And then there's like the evil person. They hear it, they hold a grudge, they go become destructive, they light things on fire, they have a terrible attitude. And so you have to ask as the giver, are my motives right? Is it true? Am I doing, did I do the best I could to understand how to do it and do it? But then the person on the other side has to just recognize, am I being a wise person, a foolish person, or am I being an evil person?
That's good.
And this is what's hard, is sometimes we did the best job we could. We actually did such a good job. You could have posted that as the material for the class, the source material for what to do. And the person hears it and they just do evil stuff with it. And that's not your problem. I mean, I know it feels like your problem, but you are responsible to be faithful and not, they got to do what they're going to do from the fruitfulness side of it. Maybe as we're getting ready to kind of wrap this up, and I don't know where else maybe you want to go, Jeremy, but I do want to say this, that I think a principle that's related to this whole conversation, and we're driving at this, like when we talked about pick the right place. I think a really important thing is, if you're going to admonish people, we'll say admonish in obscurity. You want to do hard things in private. Like, you don't want to call people out and have difficult conversations. Like, if the three of us are in a meeting, I don't think the time for me and Jeremy to have a hard conversation is in front of you, Tim. Like, there's a admonish in obscurity. Now, on the other side, praise in public. Learn to be someone that celebrates the person in public in front of other people. But when you're going to have to go have the hard conversation and admonish in obscurity, figure out a way, again, right time, right place. So I don't know where else you want to go.
This is a little bit tangentially related to some of the things you're saying. One of the things that my wife had done really well to help with, especially when you're dealing with projection or it's trying to get the tone right, is to provide context for that feedback, context for the hard conversation. And she developed this way to start the conversation that's been so incredibly helpful, which is, hey, I think we have an A- marriage, and I want to talk about how we get to an A, or I want to talk about how we get A to an A+, or I think we're struggling in this area. I would give us a B, and I want to get to a B+, because I think, especially if you're dealing with someone with projection, they immediately go to D-.
Yeah.
And so, like, in the context of work, hey, I want to give you some feedback about that public presentation you did in front of the board. I thought you did a great job. I'm going to give you an A on this. It's really good, but I really want you to be an A+ performer. And so I want to give you some feedback that might be hard to hear because of your disposition, but like framing it that way can be really helpful to protect against the people that want to push it away or project or blow up over it or go straight to level 3. I have found that to be an incredibly life-giving strategy to deal with some of these different things. I know, but backtracked a little bit before we move forward.
Any other thoughts, Tim? There's one kind of biblical thought that I want to give to put a bow on this, but anything else as you're thinking about this?
Maybe two other little nuggets that maybe haven't been said super clearly about the hard conversation. One is, be really careful to not use exaggerated language.
Good.
It's super easy once you get in it, and especially emotion gets high, you start to say the things like you always, or you never, or
I have never, ever, ever done that in my entire life.
All of that kind of stuff. Just be really cautious in that, because that ends up blowing things up on a level that's not usually helpful. And then the other is, make sure that you never bring in the invisible army with you in the conversation. Like, we all know that you.
I've been talking and everybody says.
Everybody. I mean, we know that. And it's like, no, take responsibility yourself for the conversation that you're having with that individual. And again, those are just a couple little nuggets also to be watching that I think sabotage a lot of times difficult conversations.
This is the Jesus-centered podcast, and we're talking about the principles of what does it mean to live a Jesus-centered life. And Jesus says that it's the truth that will set us free.
Yeah.
And that is both giving and receiving the truth. And I think one of the things is sometimes we become really good at dismissing messages because we don't like the method or the messenger, as opposed to asking what is true. Yeah. So I know there may be times where the messenger who said it, maybe they aren't the right person. I know maybe even the method they said may have not been the perfect method. But to ask yourself in the message, what is true? Even if 2% of it's true, or 25% of it's true, or 100% of it's true, what is true? And recognize that truth sets us free. Truth is how you grow in your relationship with Jesus. It's how you take steps forward as a professional, as a spouse, as a dad, as a friend, whatever it is. And I think it's really important to know that the truth is a big deal. And Jesus even said, when he said he said, I came to be on the side of truth.
Yeah.
And so again, this isn't permission to be a jerk. We've talked about some of the art of this and being sensitive. In fact, as I get ready to land the plane on this, I want to remind us that in this process, both the people who give and receive, Proverbs says that faithful are the wounds of a friend. Mm-hmm. That sometimes the truth that hurts us is actually the best thing. And would we be willing to consider that when we're thinking about having a hard conversation, we actually may be doing the best thing we can to set that person free, even though it's going to be hard. And on the other side, when someone has a hard conversation with us, would we be willing to consider that it may be the very thing that's going to set us free, even though it's going to hurt for a moment? And to recognize that, again, where we started this, you cannot achieve your full potential as a follower of Christ or in any area of your life, both if you don't know how to have hard conversations and you don't know how to receive hard conversations. In fact, I would suggest that for the rest of our lives, the three of us are going to constantly figure out how to get better at both sides of this. Yeah. And that if we don't, it's going to become a limit for our ability to grow and influence other people. And so this isn't something that a person should look at and go, well, if I just have a certain position in a business or a company or whatever, then I should think about this. The return on investment and knowing how to do this on both sides is huge. Yes. As we process this out. We'll say one more thing, and then Jeremy, you can end it. I also want to say that there are some times where you get ready to have a conversation with someone, and the truth is, they're a fool, and all they want to do is quarrel. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to realize sometimes that the Bible's really clear that at some point, if they want to be a fool, don't quarrel with them. Mm-hmm. It's pearls before swine. Yeah. And sometimes there's something in them that's just not ready to hear. And you tried and you did the thing. I've been dumb enough to believe that if I had 15 minutes with people, I could convince them of anything. Yeah. And I can't. And the truth is, there's been times where I've been that fool. Yeah. Where they couldn't convince me. But I've also learned that sometimes you can be ready to have the hard conversation. You can set it up. You can do it right. And they don't care. And you've got to learn to go home and just go to sleep that night. And here's the truth. Sometimes that person's your kid. It is. Yeah. And they're not ready to hear. And this is where we go back and we're going to pray to the Lord to soften their heart and see what's going to happen. So this is just such an important thing that I think we've all seen the benefit of when we've done it right, when we've done it wrong, on whatever side of the equation we've been on. But it's a really important thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you ended it with that because I think we've talked a lot about going into these hard conversations with prayer, but we equally need to be on the other end of these hard conversations of prayer, because sometimes you have to have the hard conversation and pray and pray and pray, sometimes for years before it finally clicks. Sure. Right. And all you can do, it's a way that we actually trust the Lord is like, I did what you called me to do, which is to have this hard conversation. Now I'm doing what you said. I can't change their heart. So I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. And I'm just glad that you guys were able to sit down and do this, because I think that there's a lot of people, if they could get this in them, their marriage is going to be better. Their grace group is going to be better. Their parenting is going to be better. Their friendships are going to be a better boss and a better employee. Like, so much of their life is going to be improved if they could just even make a 1% improvement in this area of life. So thanks for sharing your wisdom. You guys have got a lot of hard conversations that you've had to have with people that have been good for them, but you're able to share that wisdom with everyone in our audience, and I'm hoping they're going to take it away. So thanks again for tuning in to the Jesus-Centered Living Podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, all the different platforms. And one of the things we're doing is we're building this platform is that if you have comments, you got ideas, the things that you'd love for us to tackle, please throw those in the comments. We'd love to interact with you. Appreciate you tuning in, and share this with someone that you think might be helpful. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. Our prayer is that what you heard draws you closer to Jesus and helps you take your next step towards living a Jesus-centered life. Be sure to follow or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you decide to listen so that you can stay connected and never miss a new episode. If today's message was encouraging to you or helpful, take a moment, share it with a friend or family member who might need the same encouragement today. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Jesus-Centered Living Podcast.